Hello, nurse leaders. We've made it to the first episode of the Nurse Leader Debrief. My name is Amy Trueblood, and I am thrilled today to host the very first episode of the Nurse Leader Debrief and bring to you two of my newest friends in nursing leadership, two leaders out of Chicago who I met at the AONL conference, and I was just blown away with how they are being successful and innovative, creative, and collaborating with each other and their organization to bring a podcast to the staff and their organization, focused on their well-being as nurses. And I can't wait for you to hear more and to learn more. In fact, we had such a great time talking that this ends up being a 2-part episode. You're about to listen to part 1. So please ready yourself to debrief with my new friends, Laurin Masnari and Alyssa Saklak. Welcome to your debrief. Laurin and Alyssa, I'm so excited to see you and have you here. Welcome to our first episode of the Nurse Leader Debrief.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. I absolutely need a debrief today. So I hope this is the place we could do it.
This certainly is the place. I was just thinking that we just probably celebrated, no problem if you didn't celebrate officially, but 2 weeks from meeting each other at the conference was just this past Wednesday, I would think. And then
it's our anniversary almost.
It is our anniversary. So happy anniversary. I'm glad we could celebrate in this way together. It's hard for me to even think sometimes that I've only even known of you both for the past couple of months. So who knew being assigned as a presentation advisor would lead to such a fulfilling relationship? I'm excited to get to know you both.
I know, us too. We feel super lucky that we were partnered with you. There was some design here that this all worked out so perfectly. And Alyssa and I really feel very lucky that you even wanted to have us on the podcast, and we're really excited to be here.
Absolutely. Echoing exactly what Laurin said.
Well, I'm excited for our listeners to get to know the two of you and just to hear some of your amazing stories. So since I have only known you for a couple of months, would you each please start a little bit, share your journey, your leadership journey in nursing with us? Alyssa, why don't you go first?
Absolutely. So my nursing leadership journey would start. Laurin and I were kind of talking about this before we entered the podcast world. But I went to school in Millikan University in Decatur, Illinois, and I was a nursing major and an athlete. So I played basketball. And the funny thing is I never really saw myself as a leader. But I love sports, and I had this competitiveness, which led me to this drive and to be kind of looked to as someone to lead the team. And I always loved to lead by example. That was where my comfort zone was. And I still remember the day my mom pulled me to the side and she said, "Alyssa, you're the captain. You need to be a vocal leader. You need to talk more." And so I realized and found my voice as a leader, as an athlete. And then it really translated. I graduated from Millikan. I came back to Chicago, where I grew up and where my family was, started working in general medicine at the bedside at Northwestern, where Laurin and I's stories will cross, and really just dove into my passions and my love for nursing and the profession, and kept finding myself in these different leadership opportunities, and have been an education coordinator. I've been a program manager, and more late, this past July, transitioned to a patient care manager and on a general medicine unit. So that's really my journey. There's been so many ups and downs and all overs. And if you would have asked me back when I was in high school trying to pick a career, I would have never guessed where I am today. So a little bit about me.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, well, thank you for that. Laurin, how about you? Let's hear about you.
Yeah, my Alyssa and I think my favorite thing about the two of us is that we have such different come up stories and how we got here, yet we play off of each other so well. So where Alyssa says she never thought that she was going to be a leader, I sort of have a hard time believing that, because I've seen her as a leader for the 8 years that I've known her. But I am the oldest child, so I have oldest daughter syndrome, and I think I've always had an affinity for leadership positions, and I just like to set a good example, and I like to be a leader for the people around me. So I actually didn't think I wanted to be a nurse when I was in high school. Thought I wanted to go into journalism, like broadcast journalism. So this is kind of like a fun full circle moment for
Fun.
me to be able to do this, like the marrying of my two passions. But the reason being, I just love to talk to people. I love to hear people's stories. I like to know how did they get to the position that they're in now, which is, something that you get to do at the bedside in nursing. And I think that was one of my favorite parts. So I went to a very small all women's college in South Bend, Indiana, St. Mary's College for nursing school. And when I graduated, I moved right to Chicago, started on a unit in the medicine service line with Alyssa, and was there for a few years, became a clinical coordinator on the sister unit across the hall, and then a few years ago transitioned into the manager role. So I've been a patient care manager on a medicine cardiology unit since November of 2021. And seeing the transition that healthcare has gone through from pre-COVID as a new grad, during COVID being a clinical coordinator and kind of having a foot in the leadership door, and then this post-COVID era that we're trying to navigate in healthcare with this new generation coming up, I knew that I wanted to continue on my leadership journey. So I went back to school, got my master's from Purdue University Northwest, just graduated in December.
Yay.
And thank you. And really my passions are surrounding being a good example and a good role model for this new generation of nurses that's coming up, because the healthcare landscape is so different. So I feel like I wanted to be the voice that they could see that nursing is a desirable profession, because I feel like the social media will tell us that it's not. That's kind of my mission statement as a manager, is to teach people that this is something that you want to do and this is a desirable place to be. And we can really make an impact here, but in so many different ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I think that there's, again, all of these pieces relate to nursing leadership as well, right? Oftentimes, I've been a part of teaching courses with a variety of nurse managers across the country, and often hear that they would not recommend the role of a leader in nursing to their peers or colleagues, because it is such a challenging role. And I did want to clarify, just for my sake and the sake of the listeners, the patient care manager is the 24/7 responsible for one department role, right? We have so many titles across the country. I want to clarify.
Correct. Yeah. I manage a 30-bed inpatient unit. I have roughly 55-ish FTEs that report up to me currently.
Okay. And you, Alyssa?
I'm over a 23-bed inpatient unit and roughly around 53-ish FTEs that report up to me as well.
Good. So you both kind of mentioned your passion. I think it's extremely courageous to enter the world of nursing leadership at any point, but particularly over the past few years. So would you just describe a little bit more what it is that you found to be desirable about your current position?
I don't think that I would be where I am had it not been for the good leaders that I worked for when I was growing up as a nurse. I referenced this earlier, but I saw how the landscape of healthcare was changing so rapidly, from nurses as heroes to nurses as just people that are there to be punching bags and
Mm.
pass out pain meds and kind of just move on. And so I wanted to be the good leader for people coming up in a really challenging time that I had when I was growing up as a nurse. That really was my biggest reason for wanting to go into healthcare, because I mentioned this when we were at AONL, but if I were a new graduate nurse right now coming out of college, or even a high schooler going into college, I don't know that I would have chosen nursing, just because of what you see and the way that it's portrayed. So I wanted to be that good, solid voice for people coming up, to be a guiding light, to bring nursing back to its roots, to remind people why we do what we do.
I feel like for me, a little bit different than Laurin, in the sense that, like, I love an underdog story, and I'm constantly trying to look upstream as to what's causing problems and why are we seeing things and how we're seeing them present itself in the hospital. And I went back for my master's in public health, and I'm trying to tie that bridge and empower nurses to want to be in rooms where decisions are being made. And that to me was the empowerment and the sense of control over the profession, that I can have influence on what's happening, and I can be a part of history that makes this place a little bit better each and every day. And that's the hope and inspiration. I have to repeat that mantra to myself every day, like, written above my mirror is my why. But I feel so passionate that, the life in our world and our healthcare system presents itself in a way that it is. And, we can either complain about it and run away, or we can jump in and start to be part of that change. And that to me, I want to make that accessible, transparent, and, allow nurses in the profession to talk about it and to really be informed, because knowledge is power. And we are a powerful profession. So that's kind of my why, and why I jumped into the nursing leadership role.
Well, thank you both for sharing that. That's just such an inspiration, I think, for everybody to hear about. One, for me anyway, I know I was completely inspired meeting the two of you, and every time we talk, because oftentimes I think we can find ourselves. I've served in leadership roles at the manager, director, executive level, and I can find myself getting discouraged, wondering where this passion is out there now, because we don't hear that. To your point, Lauren, we don't hear the passionate stories, the courageous stories of the nurse leaders that are out there inspiring change and really looking to make a difference in a confident and bold manner, being willing to step up and say, I'm a baseball fan, so the put me in coach from from center. I love that. That's been something that I've loved to be a part of. I heard you saying that, Alyssa, as well. I want to be the person, oftentimes, that is around to say, hey, that we can do this. We can do this together. We need each other. And to your point earlier, and the whole purpose of this podcast, we need a debrief, right? We need to come together and help inspire each other. And that's why I'm just so thrilled to have you both in my circle and to introduce you to our listeners here, because it's just inspiring. It's inspiring to me as a person who's been doing this for a while, and to know, and that's what I want to know. And there's more, right? There's more of you, there's more of us across the country and across the world, and I'm excited to bring them all together, so we can meet and debrief about what's going on. So the two of you, now we're getting close to an anniversary for the two of you that is also very significant as we hit Nurses Week. Would you tell our leaders, or our listeners, a bit about what you have done together to make an impact at Northwestern and beyond, of course?
Do you want to kick it off, Lauren?
Sure. Yeah. So, Alyssa and I were crazy enough to have people believe in us, and fortunate enough that we work at an organization that was able to support us in a number of different ways. We wanted to reach this new generation of nurses that we've been talking about. And we did some research on where are they, and they're living online. Gen Z is online, and Alyssa and I function in a way that we like to meet people where they are. So we went and found Gen Z online in the form of a podcast called Better RN. It was 7 episodes in total, and we wanted to focus on well-being in totality. So each of our different episodes, we brought in some key stakeholders. We talked to nurses, we talked to chaplains, we talked to financial advisors about these different domains of wellness, and how does this relate to nursing, and specifically Gen Z? How can you work a night shift but still get enough sleep? How can you do your 312s, maybe pick up a little bit of extra overtime, but still find time to work out? Why is it important to prioritize your mental health? Things like that. So we've recorded a season 1 of a podcast called Better RN, 7 episodes and a trailer. And that is how we came to meet Amy. We were lucky enough to present on it at AONL in the form of a group discussion, and Amy was our advisor. That's our come up. Alyssa did a lot of the back end work on getting approval for the grant and all of that. So,
yeah, that was I have a crazy idea. I want us to run with this. What are the 1,000,001 ways I can make this happen? And one of them was, find the funding, produce a product, and make it a way that people can't turn away from it. And for me, it was the conversations I was having with nurses as a leader, and just getting to know them and knowing about what are your stressors. And after COVID, it was this holistic approach to wellness that I think oftentimes we forget about. What are the stressors even outside of work? And more importantly, what's that lens of nursing that adds a whole nother layer of stress to, financial, mental, physical, spiritual, all of those aspects. And so it was really storytelling and finding experts to tell the story and to not just provide health information, but health information for nurses. And that's where the podcast took off. And so Laurin was my go-to to be a co-host with, because we grew up together in the locker room, meeting each other day one. And so I totally appreciate too the holistic of, like, we joke around and say we're yin and yang, but we have such different energies, and it just, I think, allows for a broad audience to find some relation to either of us or hear something that sounds familiar to them. So yeah, that was our journey.
And that's fantastic. And I have listened to every episode and your trailer, and am just so impressed with how the two of you work together, and also how you were able to engage people out. So this isn't all nurses talking. You had experts from your organization or beyond that came in, and they seem to all have great relationship and passion for this, for the well-being of our teams as well. Would you speak a little bit about that? Because I think sometimes we feel like we're on an island. Our leaders and our nurses, we kind of feel like we're all out there in some sort of, I hate to use the term, but battle from time to time, and we feel like we need to do this by ourselves, or take the weight of the world on our shoulders. Can you talk a little bit about what you've learned from your guests in terms of support for nurses and well-being?
I think where I want to start is that as much as we are part of the healthcare system as providers, we seek care through the same system. And
Mm.
so that was kind of that point that Lauren and I really leaned into as we forged relationships with other people, and talked about, well, here are some of the specific pieces to nurses that are struggling. And we were met with just such open arms and such knowledge to share the story, to say, well, this is what this looks like for an individual who's dealing with X, Y, and Z. I think specifically about our episode about on spirituality and kind of the moral distress that we may face as leaders and as nurses. And Alex, who's one of our chaplain at our hospital, we had developed a relationship with him, and a friendship to come and support nurses. And I don't think that our nurses were always thinking of them as a support system. And so, like, to be able to bridge that and highlight that relationship, our hope was that people then felt comfortable to reach out to the chaplain in their hospital and to say, like, hey, I know that you were on this podcast episode, and I'm really struggling, ethically with this situation that's happening on the floor, or whatever the case is. That was the hope, is to forge those relationships and be like, reach out to the expert. We know a lot of things as nurses, but there's other people who can help us and to hear us. And so I think we tried our best to again holistically approach all different aspects. Laurin, I'm not sure if you had a different spin on the leaders that we had on there, or how we kind of reached out to them.
Yeah, I think something that I've always known to be true is that you are never alone in anything. And if you ever have had a feeling or a thought, I guarantee you're not alone in that. Someone else has also felt that way before. And doing this podcast and connecting with people from different disciplines, and even the nurses that we spoke to, just validated that even more for me, that there are people in this organization and beyond that want you to be successful and that can relate to you. We just have to work a little bit harder to create those avenues to connect people. But it was very validating for me that we are never alone in a thought or a feeling. There's always someone that can relate.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important for us as leaders to embrace individually as well, right? That's true for us. And I want to point that out. What you were both saying to our listeners is it applies to you as well. Anybody who's hearing this right now, and that's a part of why we need this community as well of nurse leaders to really help each other. Tell me, what is the response from your staff been, or what is the response around your organization been to the podcast?
We had such incredible feedback. Again, I mentioned this, but we're lucky enough to work in an organization and work for senior leaders who had a lot of, call it, blind trust and faith in what we wanted to do. And it hit really well. We just covered so many different topics that it was relatable to so many different people. We wanted to target nurses, but we had our director of our support services talk about how she felt like it was so relatable for some of the things that her staff was going through, our partners in environmental services and things like that, when we talked about spirituality and the holistic well-being of the person. And it was a lot of those stories that I think Alyssa and I silently hoped would happen, but our main purpose and our mission and vision was to talk to nurses. But I was so incredibly happy that it was so well received among all different types of disciplines, um, including our senior leaders.
And even like outside of our own hospital, like obviously you have a built-in audience, when you're producing a podcast within your own organization. But it was, friends of friends who knew a nurse and they shared the podcast. And it was, people that I went to school with that are now teaching nursing and are using it as a debrief method for after nursing clinicals to help professionally developed nurses. And so the outpouring of just how much that can spread was so cool to see. And it was beyond what I could even envision. I think we went into this and I said from the start, if one nurse listens to this and it helps them get to the resources that they need to help them be the best version of themselves, our jobs are done. And, we may not ever hear that, right? We may never see that, but just knowing how far and wide it's spread and how it's been used, I'm hopeful deep inside that, it's making an impact and changing the narrative around how we manage and care for ourselves.
Yeah, I have absolutely no doubt that it is doing exactly that, and the two of you should be commended for that, and I'm hopeful that we get to continue hearing from you all in that platform as we move forward. Let me switch gears here a little bit on is that what very common for our nurse leaders. In fact, there's so much evidence out there suggesting specifically those in manager types of roles, supervisors, directors, specifically those individuals, we prioritize the well-being of our teams. We carry that so much on our shoulders, and we sometimes forget that we need to also prioritize our own well-being. So if you can shift gears into what's your perspective on the wellness state of those in your types of positions, and how can we help? And what are your tips in terms of your own personal well-being as a leader?
This has been my own journey of like going through the podcast, producing the content, really trying to outpour and support, the nurses. And then as a leader, evaluating how I'm doing this for myself. And personally, it was asking for help, feeling comfortable to ask for help, whether it was from Laurin or another manager, or even when I went into my physician's office and saying, hey, I'm really stressed or I'm really struggling with this, and to have that dialogue. And it was to care for myself as much as I want to care for other people. And leaders face that all the time. But I do think like sometimes when stress is coming from like everywhere, every direction, there's that moment where you're like, I need help. And it's, calling another friend. And then it's really creating that balance between how can I let this stuff, stay at work? And then how do I be a human outside of work and, continue to buy a house and get married and do all the things. That to me, and I still think I'm a green, newer manager, but that for me was like, I don't have to be perfect at this, but it's each day, one step at a time, refilling my cup. And I lean on Laurin probably more than I need to, but it's those partnerships that really help kind of check in. And sometimes it's that friend that's like, hey, you need to take a day off, or let's go for a walk. And Laurin has been that huge support for me.
I think it is so important to surround yourself with people who recognize what you need when maybe I don't recognize it myself. We are super lucky in our service line here that we have a big group of people who will jump before we even finish the word. And our director that we work under actually hired Alyssa and I both as new nurses when we started in 2016. So to have that sort of full circle moment with us still working with her 8 years later, she knows us. She knows us so well. And she has created a culture, and her the VP that she reports up to, from the top down, they have created a culture of support and open lines of communication. And I don't think I have ever been afraid to go to Megan or Maureen and say, I need help with something. I'm struggling. I need a different avenue to get from A to B. And I've never been met with anything other than, let's figure it out. We will figure it out together. So that really supports my well-being now, having been in the manager role going on 3 years, because I trust the people that I work with. And that's something that I'm just lucky with. And I don't know that everyone at every organization has that. But the best piece of advice that I received as a new manager was that the work will still be there tomorrow, because that's hard to remember when you're so in the weeds with emails and attendance and discipline and performance, but also making sure that the patients are happy and you're doing service recovery. There are so many things to do. And like Alyssa said, asking for help goes so far, but also you have to remember to protect your own peace. You are taking care of the nurses. Who is taking care of you? You need to know that when your shift is done or when it's time to go home, it's time to go home. If there's an emergency, someone will contact you, but the work is going to be there tomorrow.
Mm. That's so powerful, such powerful comments, because I think we can all we get mixed up, like what you're describing as taking care of the staff and focusing on the well-being and putting forward efforts that are going to be sustainable over time, encouraging people to take care of themselves. To me, that's the work. And Alyssa, I want to get back to too. We've talked about coaching, right? And I think that's a fascinating topic within nursing leadership, because sometimes it's met with people are confused, and so I want to talk about that too. And there's so many different directions I feel like we could go with this. I'm going to have you guys on every week so we can get through all of these discussions. But two things that you hit on, Laurin, that I wanted to highlight. First, let's talk about this. I know it's hard for you to imagine because it's you guys have been at Northwestern for your entire careers at this point. I'm here to say I started my career at Mayo up in Rochester, Minnesota. High caliber organizations that we're talking about here that have a lot of really great cultural elements that lead to exceptional quality, and just highly respected organizations with a lot of support. So I know, if I know our listeners well enough, I know somebody's going, okay, you can do this there, right? How am I supposed to step into this courageous space when I'm in a place where maybe that support doesn't exist? And that would be a hypothetical for you, of course. But any thoughts on how you grab a hold of that leader inside of you, regardless of the circumstances that you find yourself in?
You find the community. You have to. Like, because, and I think it's easy to sit here and it's sunshine and rainbows, right? But like, there's been, times in my career where maybe people didn't believe in the topic that I was, passionate about, or even myself. And so it was being vulnerable to be that person to reach out and find other like-minded individuals who are feeling the same way, to build a community, because that is the only antidote to suffering and pain and all of the human problems that we get. And it's to find that. And in organizations, no matter how big or small, you've got to find the people and make those connections, whether it's, hey, let's go grab a coffee, or hey, do you want to go for a walk after work or for lunch? It's those small connections where you can share those moments and find other people who are on the same page with you that are going to help lift you up and help problem solve and find those solutions. And that, to me, I feel very passionate that, like, I'm the queen of, like, I can talk to anyone and make a friend. So I also realize that, like, even my Uber driver in the morning is like, making friends with and have a great day. And we just, had a connection, but connection that is going to help just propel the energy and propel you in the right place, to allow for bigger things to happen. Laurin, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah. And I think everything starts with a step. So if you see a problem and you choose to not do anything about it, then you're stuck. But if you see a problem and you take a tiny step towards making that better or initiating some sort of a change, you just have to keep going. It's exhausting, and sometimes you're gonna blur those boundaries of professional and home life, and things are gonna, but if it's something that you're passionate about and it's something that you really feel like, I can make a difference about this, everything starts with a step. And the people are out there. We said this at the beginning of recording. The good people are out there, and there are like-minded people that also want to make changes, but maybe they're too scared. There's strength in numbers. I feel more confident and stronger and like I can achieve anything when I am arm in arm with Alyssa, or when I am arm in arm with another one of my partners in management here. And so there is so much value in the concept of community, whatever that community looks like for you, wherever you are, in whatever capacity you need to find it. But I think you just have to find the like-minded people and be courageous enough to take that first step forward.
Wow, what amazing advice, and what an amazing time talking with Laurin and Alyssa. I sure hope that you have been as inspired by them as I have. And don't worry, you will have an opportunity to hear more from them as our discussion continued in a very robust way regarding their own journeys as leaders and what advice they have to their colleagues just like you across the country who are facing the very same challenges, how they've overcome them, and any words of wisdom they might have. That's coming right up in episode 1, part 2 of the Nurse Leader Debrief. Stay tuned, and please subscribe and like us and share these episodes as we grow our listenership to nurse leaders who just need a debrief. We'll be back for more with Laurin and Alyssa in part 2. Tune in. Thank you.